Hi there my friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. 2 weeks ago Derwent sent me 100 tin of the Inktense pencils. I already had the 72 set, but they sent me the 100 set as a gift as they'd just released 28 new colours. So when I opened them up I swatched out the 28 new colours. You can see those ones at the bottom of the swatch sheet. And then I tried to decide what I was going to create with them, just using those 28 colours. And I decided on a little red-eyed tree frog. As you can see, I've popped the finished painting to the left-hand side of the picture. Now this video nearly didn't happen because when I started editing the footage, I'd forgotten to tie my hair back, and so my hair kept wisping in and out of frame. So if you see a few wisps coming in from the bottom left hand side, that's why I've put the frog painting there finished instead of the top corner. Okay, so I'm using the paper I'm working with is Archie's Cold Press watercolour paper. It's in a block form, and it's just 10 centimetres by 25 centimetres. And for those of you that still work in inches like me, it's 3.9 inches by 9.8. Now the palette I'm using is by Caran d'Ache, and it's just a textured surface palette. You can make one of these yourself. Get an old plastic palette, sand it with a piece of sandpaper to roughen up the surface, and then a little grab the pigment from your pencils. So this is how I'm going to predominantly be using these 28 pencils during this project. So I decided in a little sketchbook, made some notes, deciding on what colours I wanted to use and where on this painting. It's nothing like the photograph that I was working from. So I decided to start off with the background, and this part of the filming went okay. Okay, so I've just scribbled out 2 of the pencils onto the palette. You don't need to apply any pressure. The palette will just take the pigment because it's got that rough surface. Added some water. I do work with deionized water when I'm working water-soluble mediums, just to protect the mediums in the future. Added water to the area and then started working wet in wet. Really simple technique. Beginners can do this technique. It's there's nothing in this project at all that wouldn't be suitable for a beginner to use in their projects if they want to create with Inktense pencils. Now the reason Derwent sent me this set, as I said, they've released these 28 new colours, and the reason they gifted me a brand new 100 tin is because I'm a Derwent ambassador. I was asked August last year, I believe, and I jumped at the chance to work with more of their products, and they're a fantastic company to work with. They care about their art products, they care about the artists they work with and for. They love feedback, excuse me, positive and negative. Not that there's many negatives at all. And yeah, great company, great products. Okay, so I'm working with a filbert brush here. That's a flat brush with a rounded end, so it's no harsh lines, hopefully. Popping down some water so I can work wet into wet again. Now this video was running at about 3 hours when I started editing, but because of all the clipping out and cutting and snipping and swiping and everything else you have to do in the video editing world, it's down to about 22 minutes. So there's plenty to see, but obviously there are some bits where I've had to cut. So just working with these 2 colours and working in very gently with the brush, so no pressure at all being added to the paper with the brush. Nice and gentle, keeping the brush clean in between colour changes, and then obviously mixing the 2 colours together to form different hues and tones and colours. Really is a lovely medium to work with. Now these Inktense pencils, if you're not familiar with the name Inktense, it's the Derwent range, and they've created Inktense pencils, Inktense blocks and Inktense pans. Okay, so there's the top, the middle and the bottom finished. all work the same way. Now I did dry each layer with a hairdryer, and then I added 2 more layers to the background. So the background's made up of 2 substantial layers in the finished project, and 1 just where I went in and just did a little bit here and there where I felt it needed it, just to get that intensity. When Inktense dries, it's pretty much permanent, so you can work on canvases, materials, wood, paper obviously, and it is permanent when dry, which makes it great for glazing, but a little bit more difficult if you like lifting paint back off, because obviously it will be permanent, the layers will be permanent underneath. So now going on to the bottom petal of this flower, applying some water there just so we can work wet into wet again, because at this stage I don't want any strong lines showing up. Now if I worked wet on to dry, there'd be a chance that the paper would just simply absorb the pigment, and then I wouldn't be able to get any soft layering and things like that, and soft blending. So it is important, if you want to work in a softer style to begin with, it's easier just to work wet into wet. This paper is very forgiving, especially at this size. Like I said, it's a block, which means it's been gummed. The pages are gummed together round all 4 sides. Then there's a little notch, a little opening running down one of the sides, in the middle, but down one of the sides. And you simply insert a palette knife once your painting is dry, and you just edge round, all the way round the gummed areas, just to release the block. So that was layer 1. As I said, the background was made up of 2 full layers and a very light layer, very light third layer. The petals are made up of around about 3 layers as well, and I thoroughly dry the layers with the hairdryer in between. So it's really simple. Brilliant materials to work with. If you haven't given them a go, they're all open stock. So the pencils, the blocks and the pans are all open stock, so you could just get a handful of colours. If you're into botanicals, they do some fantastic pinks and purples and magentas and things, as you can see that I've scribbled onto the palette there. And going on with the second layer. And as you can see, the first layer is not lifting at all. So it's lovely if you like building up glazes. It's a wonderful pigment to work with, wonderful material to work with, I should say. So yeah, going through this footage was just heartbreaking, because there was so much I'd got to cut out. But you do get the gist of exactly how I worked it all with the footage that I've got left in. And if you do find you see a few hairs flicking backwards and forwards, I hope you don't find it too distracting. There's my head just poking in there, the glasses. Oh my word. Oh dear, sorry about that. I'm going to find 22 minutes of apologising. Now, keeping the surface wet. So I haven't dried this one out, this layer that I've just finished, and I'm able to, as long as I'm quick, is to keep on adding further pigment and just letting it bleed in. When I'm working on something like a petal or a leaf, or even fur for that matter, I always go in the right direction. So if you do feel like you're leaving any lines underneath that you've not been able to take out, at least they'll be going in the correct direction, so they shouldn't be too noticeable on the finished product. Drying it again with a hairdryer. So with Inktense, I like to build up in lots and lots of light layers, and that way you can really build the intensity of the colour, because that is one of the major selling points for these materials, the Inktense, is that the colours really pop. And any dry mediums, water mixable dry mediums, I always swatch them out, because they never look the same when they're dry as when they're wet. And it's not until you wet them and see them in actual swatch form that you realise just how vibrant the colours are in Inktense. So going on again. So now this is building up the third layer on this petal and just increasing that depth of colour. And obviously the more layers you get, because it's a translucent material, very few of them are opaque. Well, they've got a tiny bit of opacity, but not an awful lot. So the more layers you can build up, the better, because the light will enter through the top layers and it will just start jumping about, bouncing about on the layers underneath, and it will give your project a lot more depth. I think that's called refraction, although don't count me on it. Light refracting and bouncing around in the layers, that sounds right. So building up again and keeping this nice and quick, working it quick, because obviously like watercolours and like normal inks, they do dry relatively quickly through absorption and the water evaporating into the air. So onto the second petal. And obviously with this medium, as with all of the projects that I work on in all different mediums, I do go backwards and forwards between different areas on a painting, to keep the painting balanced, and you can do this. I like to work light to dark with Inktense, but you can work dark to light, although it is somewhat more limited than working light to dark. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking of having a play with Inktense too. But it's all about layering. For me, in most mediums, because I'm self-taught, it's nearly always about building up the layers, concentrating on contrast more so than colour, and getting your darks dark enough and your lights light enough just to create a bit of a pop when you look at it. And obviously creating contrast doesn't mean just black and white. It's to do with the lighter tones versus the darker tones in a painting. If you're having problems deciphering whether a colour has a darker tone or a lighter tone than another colour, then either take a photograph of your artwork and turn it into black and white. I think most of us now do have mobile phones where you can do that by just decreasing the colour saturation, and that will show you the image in black and white. So you can do that with your reference image, you can do that with your project as you're painting as well, just to make sure you're getting your contrast correct within a painting. That's if it matters to you. If you just want to sit and have a play, you sit and have a play. Art is for enjoying, and don't let anything that I say or anybody else say take that away from you. If you like to create, then that's the main thing. So glazing over again. I think out of the 28 colours, I used around about 24 of them, 23 or 24 of them in this. I didn't have to, it's just that I just wanted to push the colours a little bit further just to see exactly what what they could do. Stumbling over my words now, and I have got a coffee. I'm trying to think what I'd be like if I didn't have a coffee, half asleep. Back in with a filbert brush. And then this brush here that I'm using is by Rosemary & Co. It's a British company, and this particular brush is my favourite, and it's a series 344 and it's a number 6. So with Inktense you can use your watercolour brushes or acrylic brushes. Either way it's going to work, and because I'm putting the dry pigment onto the palette first, or you can be lifting it off with the wet brush off the tip of the pencil if you just need a tiny little bit of pigment. It doesn't damage your brushes at all. Even going over the rougher surface of that palette doesn't damage your brushes. And what I don't suggest though, and I have seen people do it with watercolour pencils, so I don't suggest it with any pencils at all, is dipping them in a jar of water to activate the pigment. Don't do that, because if the water seeps up and into the wooden casing surrounding the pigment is likely to split, And also you don't want your pigment inside the pencil remaining damp for any length of time. So if you do want to take pigment straight from a pencil, just wet your brush and then just delicately wipe your brush across the pencil tip. Okay, so working wet into wet again. Working in the base coat first and working light to dark. That's all I'm doing, and then you can go backwards and forwards, light to dark, dark to light, and just build those layers up. And the more layers you put on with this with the Inktense, the more it starts to behave more like a gouache. It's still permanent, but the opacity, you can play around with that as well, and especially by mixing some of the opaque colours, the more opaque colours, sorry, with the more translucent colours, you can vary the opacity and translucency as well without losing the vibrancy of the pigment. None of the Inktense colours in the pencil range are as opaque as something like gouache. They've all got that translucency, obviously, because they want to let the light of the paper shine through. But some colours do have a little bit of a more opaque tendency, I guess you could say. So in the swatches, where if you have a look at the swatch sheet right at the beginning of the video, you can see that I've done little squares, and you put the pure pigment at the top of the little square and then drag it down with a damp brush, and then it gives you a range of hues, I guess, well, a range of opacity. I also put a black line across each box, and by the way that colour dries on top of that black line will show you how translucent or how opaque a colour is. I can't get my words out, sorry. So yeah, all the footage excuse me, of doing the frog's body was lost, I'm afraid, but it was just done exactly the same as I did the flower petals, just building up very gradually in layers. That's all it is, just really thin, translucent layers. Excuse me. I'm working wet into wet for the eyes. There are other videos on my YouTube channel that show me working in Inktense, so if this isn't hitting the mark for you, then because of the footage that's had to be cut out, then please feel free to go and have a look. There's a beta fish, which is your Siamese fighting fish in Inktense. That's a full video. There's a green iguana in Inktense. That's a full video as well, and they're on my YouTube channel. So just dropping a little bit more in. I was so close to the painting and I kept looking up at the monitor to make sure my head wasn't getting in frame. And of course, duh, when I look up, of course my head's not in the frame because I've just moved to look up. Oh, crumbs. Why do I do it? So next project, the camera is going to be situated where if I get in the way, I'm going to actually be hitting my head. So that's... I'm going to take a massive step and move my camera right the way down so my head can't get in the way anymore, and I need to tie my hair back for every video. Oh, I might have to leave myself a post-it note to remind myself, because I was so disheartened when I started editing this video footage. Never mind. We live and learn, don't we? Well, I hope we learn anyway. So just dropping in a little bit more of the red there. What you can do is, if I were to do this painting again, and that's it, we live and learn, I think I would have masked out some of the highlights. So the lightest parts on the frog, I think I would have popped in a little bit of masking fluid, worked around it, dried it off, and then taken the masking fluid off and then popped in very light wash. What I ended up doing with this is, because there wasn't a white in with the new 28 colours, obviously there's a white in the 100 set, but I didn't want to pull that out. I just wanted to stick with the new 28 colours. is I got a little bit of white gouache, and just speckled a little bit here and there. And then, because it's gouache, it's a water-based medium as well, which is the same as Inktense. And then got a little bit of translucent colour and just started blending the two together just to bring the highlights back out. Because as I said, it's really hard to lift because it's permanent, and that is one of its properties, and that's one of the properties I love about it, because you can endlessly glaze without the fear of the colours underneath lifting. And obviously with gouache as well, you can, if you don't like where you've put it, you can simply lift it off and start again because the layers underneath are permanent. So just blending that round again. So just lessening the effect of the gouache for now. And then I'll dry it off with the hairdryer, and I can I can go over it if I don't like it, or I can lift it off if I don't like it. You can glaze over it. Gouache does have a tendency of lifting easily, but if you're very light-handed, you can actually glaze over it and just tint it. Okay, and there we have him, short and sweet. I did a little white outline round him with gouache as well. I hope you've enjoyed this haphazard, mushed together video. Sorry that there was quite a bit of footage missing, but I'll make up for it on my next videos. Please like and subscribe, and take a look at my channel's videos if you want to have a look at a more in-depth video with the Derwent Inktense. Thank you for Derwent for sending me the 100 set. It is truly appreciated. It's a blessing to be able to work with such a wonderful company. As I said, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share the videos with your friends, share my channel with your friends, that would be great. The algorithm likes that. And everybody stay safe, stay creative, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye for now. Bye.